I'm Isaki Voelker, creator and author of Let Me Tell You a Tale. I've been on hiatus for a while now because of a bunch of different things. I had to fly out to Texas. I was supposed to get surgery, but that got postponed, unfortunately, and then I moved, and I've just been dealing with a lot of pain, and the weather changed because I deal with chronic pain and stuff. Also, I had something that happened in August, and it weighed very heavily on me, and I knew that it was going to be a little bit of time before I was able to get back into what I write about, which is a horror, a lot of things. So today's story is going to be about what did happen in August. It is true events, and because we are going to be talking about someone that really did pass away, I ask that you please be respectful in the comments. If anything like this has ever happened to you, please, if you're up to it, share the experience in the comments down below. I would greatly appreciate it. If you don't know how to respond to this story, that's okay, because I don't really know how to respond to it as well. It's definitely something that has changed how I see things, how I react to things, and well, let's just go ahead and get right into it. I think you'll get it once you hear it. So also, yeah, like I said, I did move, so new backgrounds, new settings, and everything. You might hear my little one. I'm sorry if you do hear her in the background. Hopefully it wasn't take away from the ambience, but all right, let's get into it. I found a dead body. The title is a blunt way to start this story. Maybe blunt is the wrong word. Unusual or uncomfortable may be more appropriate. But then who is to determine what is appropriate at this point in time? I do not work in a field where it is common for me to see such a thing. Thing feels almost wrong to say. Too casual in a way to put it. Deceased human sounds more polite, but what I saw did not register as human. Not at first, at least. You'd think someone who writes horror and listens to the most obscene and terrifying true crime podcasts, those that question if all humans are born with humanity or not, would have recognized what I saw right away. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I apologize. I'm still processing everything that has happened. Let me step back a bit. Hello, my name is Isaki and I write horror among other things, and yesterday I found what I hoped I wouldn't find. I found a dead body. Did I go looking for it? Yes. Yes, I did, and I am glad I did. However, I wish I did it sooner. You see, I've become physically disabled in the past couple of years, and that has changed how I work and how I get around. I tend to stay close to home because rideshares add up and I can no longer drive. So I walk, and I walk a lot when my body allows it. Walking allowed me to get to know who lived in my area, from the lady at the post office to the homeless man who sat by the red box outside the corner store. Some people told me their names and we swapped stories. Others I just watched from afar, silently keeping an eye on their well-being. The homeless man being one of these people. He came to the area not long after I did. I walked by his spot for 3+ years. One of the first times I saw him in the area, I happened to have my wallet on me, something I tend not to carry unless I have to. I came out of the corner store's automatic doors, turned a corner, and saw him sitting by the red box. He was a Caucasian man, looking to be about his mid to late 30s with dark brown hair, short and scruffy. His face was often covered in the short shadow of a beard, and his skin grew very tanned from the sun. Typically, he wore a long-sleeved jacket, baseball cap, shorts, boots, and carried a backpack. The backpack and jacket gave me ex-military feels, but I couldn't say for sure if he was a vet or not. That day, I stopped and said hello. I can't remember if he had asked me for money. He probably did, but I didn't have any cash on me. I did, however, have my card and offered to buy him some food from the store. I asked him what he wanted to eat. He said something along the lines of a soda and a crappy snack. Instantly, that activated my mom mode. I scolded him. Told him that wasn't food. Now what did he really want? I wound up buying him a couple bagfuls of non-perishable Easy to open food and drinks that made sense for the 110-degree Fahrenheit heat we typically have during the summer. I can't remember if he told me his name. I'm sure I asked because I strongly believe homeless people should be treated with basic human respect, so long as they aren't being threatening, just like anyone. However, my memory for names is far from my best quality, and his has become lost to time. His response for the food was grateful and soft-spoken. Looking back on things now, I always saw him with a drink like soda, but never any water or food, despite him having a bit of a belly. Over the years, I didn't buy him food again, but I still made sure to say hello and smile every time I passed him, either alone or with my daughter. He always smiled back a gentle but sad-looking smile. I never saw him beg on the street until very recently, but he never grew thin. He wasn't a talker, not one of those that will tell you their whole life story without much prompting, at least not to me. Then again, I try to keep my distance from strangers, as my young daughter was with me most of the time, and I myself am a short, petite woman. Unfortunately, I am too intimately familiar with the evils that tempt mankind and would rather avoid repeating some instances. On my walks, I continued to keep an eye out for him just to make sure he was doing all right. He stayed right across from a hospital, so at least if there ever was an emergency, he could go there. Maybe he even did. It's not uncommon in the U.S. for someone homeless to wander into the ER looking for food and warmth. Flash forward to July, the beginning of the death of another hot and arid summer. I stepped out of that same corner store by myself. I turned the corner and was faced with the homeless man in his usual spot by the DVD rental. I have a habit of trying my best to look people in the eye when I greet them, and this time when I said hello, something stood out to me. The whites of his eyes were the soft yellow of butter. I knew that was associated with jaundice and that it was a bad sign. It made me worry about his well-being. I mentioned his eyes to my grandmother who lived with me. She, in recognition, and said, "He's a wino." I was taken aback. Never heard that term used anywhere but in memes, and asked her what she meant by that. Sadly, my grandmother's father was a drunk, the worst kind too, the violent kind. She had her fair share of experiences growing up around him, so I believed her when she told me it meant he was a drunk. That, plus the fact that there was always many bottles of alcohol littered around the general area where he stayed. She told me his liver, his internal organs, were shutting down. I'm going to find him dead before I move at the end of the month. The thought flashed across my mind and my heart sunk. I knew that feeling all too well. Ever since I was a child, I've known things without knowing, and they have always come true. It's called being claircognizant, and it runs in the family on my grandmother's side. I've learned time and time again to listen to this inner voice, or I may have some sort of regret about not listening to it later on. I can tell the difference between instinct, deduction, and this inner voice. This time, however, I chose to chalk it up to my overthinking, true crime listening self. I refused to believe that he was going to die so soon. It was just too sad of a thing. When he wasn't sitting by the red box, he liked to hang out in this dirt lot that sat in between houses and a small shopping center with condos behind it. So it had a brick wall on 3 sides and a not too busy street out in front of it. My home was 2 housing complexes down, so no more than a 15-minute walk to the corner if my little one wasn't tagging along. There was nothing but dirt, rocks, and small desert foliage, and a few large desert bushes scattered through this rectangular space that ran about 500 feet deep and 300 feet wide, or about 150 meters by 90 meters. It was behind one of these large bushes, down by a small slope of dirt, that he made his bed of sorts. He was hidden from anyone that walked by because of the slope, and his bush was next to one of the brick walls. To know he was there, you'd have to walk down into the dirt lot a little ways and look over behind the bush. I knew about his spot because I too enjoyed spending time in that dirt lot. It's a wondrous dirt lot filled with fossils and remnants from the ancient sea floor. I use the rocks and fossils in that lot to teach my daughter and add to my oddities collection. I always kept an eye on that man's spot because even kind people can sometimes do bad things when in a testing predicament. It's best to always use wisdom to avoid regret. I told my grandmother about the man's yellowing eyes right before I was to fly out from Las Vegas, Nevada to Dallas, Texas. I was going to perform a hand fasting ceremony for one of my best friends on August 3rd. Although it was to be a joyous time, my thoughts went back to that man and my grandmother's words. I could only hope that the foreshadowing I felt stayed within the confines of my mind, that creative and ever-reeling and solving torment of mine. Sometimes I wish it would shut up and allow me to remain in darkness, for in blind darkness there is quite serenity. Once I returned home from Texas, I resumed my walks to the corner to run errands. I was relieved to see him. He was off in the distance, but alive. I told myself everything was fine for now, and that after the end of the month, I wouldn't be able to check on him anymore, so I should just stop worrying. Unfortunately, that is much easier said than done, as I am an empath. My heart bleeds for those I don't even know. I feel everything. Everything I see in the news, everything I hear or am told, everything my mind conjures up in make-believe scenarios. It is both a blessing and a curse, for there are times I cannot control it when I strongly desire to. August 8th, 2 days later. I once again walked to the corner post office with my daughter. So long as it didn't get over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, I take her along with me with some water. We walked past the houses on the sidewalk lined with bushes and trees that didn't belong in a desert. We walked along the edge of the dirt lot playing Pokemon Go. Then we turned into the shopping center. Where we turned in at was directly on the other side of the wall where the homeless man slept. Parking spots ran up along the brick wall, and there was a path for cars to pull out of the shopping center onto the main street. On the other side of the short path for cars was the corner convenience store. It had a pharmacy drive-thru and 2 large dumpsters out back. So, in order, it went dirt lot, wall, parking spots, path for cars, store, and then more parking around the store. It wasn't unusual for the dumpsters to sometimes smell putrid on a hot day if they were full. Other times, the smell of sewage would come up from a small manhole, but that was further into the shopping complex. Not something you could smell from the edge of the street where we currently stood. Today was hot, and I smelt something foul, but it was light. A few steps past the first dumpster, and I could no longer smell it. My daughter didn't say anything, but that small inner voice did. You know what that is, and it isn't trash. No, I am overthinking again, I thought back. Yes, that smell was right near where he stayed, but I couldn't exactly tell where it was protruding from. It could even be vomit off somewhere where I can't see. Many bottles of whiskey and vodka were scattered all over the ground. Sometimes I even saw those colorful plastic buzzballs and thought they were Christmas ornaments. All this litter was the only reason I wasn't thrilled about having a liquor store in the small shopping center. My daughter and I ran our errands, and I began to think. Since it wasn't over 100 degrees Fahrenheit today, maybe we should go look for fossils in the dirt for a little bit. My daughter is always excited to play in the dirt and make up stories with broken sticks. She is 5 and the daughter of a writer after all. As always, I made sure to keep our distance from where the homeless man lived, but I did try to inconspicuously look over in his direction. I was trying to check on him and ease my mind, but the shadows from the large bush and the overhead trees from the parking lot side just didn't permit me to see anything from my distance. I didn't want to get any closer because my daughter was with me, so after a little rock looking, we went home. I went to the corner again on the 14th and on the 16th alone because of the heat. I cannot remember how much more except scurrying by the area and holding my breath where I knew it would potentially smell. It wasn't until the 20th came that I was forced to take notice of the smell once again. That day it wasn't too hot, and I brought my little one along again. When she is with me, I slow my pace to hers instead of the speed walking I typically do solo. We walked and talked and played Pokemon Go as we normally did until we got to the end of the brick wall. We turned into the shopping center to head to our local post office. My daughter said something about the smell to me, and I could only agree that it was indeed very bad. That little voice whispered to me again, "You know what it is." I pushed it away. How would I know what that smell was? No, let's just get past the stinky area, drop off the packages I carried, and head back. We would not be looking at rocks today. I'm not going to believe what that voice says to me. I refuse. 2 days later, August 22nd, 2024. My phone said the high for the day wasn't going to even hit 100 degrees Fahrenheit where I was at. Awesome. My tiny tot can join me again instead of staying home with my grandmother. It was bright and sunny with little cloud cover, but there was some moisture in the air. There must have been residual rain from Arizona trying to make its way here. Once again, we walked out of our complex, down past 2 housing turnoffs, past the dirt lot, round at the corner, and the smell! It was so strong. It permeated the air, the trees, the dirt, everything, and refused to let go. The smell was sickeningly sweet and very unique. I tried hard to picture a comparison from my memories. The closest thing I could think of was the smell of vomit going rancid on the sidewalk during a 110-degree Fahrenheit day. A light breeze blew from the west, from the dirt lot into the parking area where we were walking. I looked over at the dumpsters that belonged to the drive-through business and knew it was not coming from them. I knew today I had to check. There was no more ignoring things. I hurried my daughter quickly to the post office, dropped off the packages, and then slowly started walking back along the brick wall. I pulled out my cell phone and called the one person I always call whenever shit is about to go down, my best friend. Luckily, she answered after just a couple of rings, and I asked her if she was at work or was free to stay on the line for a few minutes. She was free. Perfect. My heart was racing as I cupped my hand over my mouth and the phone speaker and whispered to my friend. And went something along the lines of, "Hey, so remember I told you about that homeless man? Well, there's this really bad smell coming from where he stays, and I think I should go check up on him. I think he might be dead, so just stay on the line with me. Serenity's with me. I'm going to tell her we're going to look at rocks." I kept my friend on the line and guided my daughter carefully past the smell, around the corner, and over to the dirt lot. We walked up over the mound of dirt and a few steps down onto solid, compacted tan and red sand. I told my daughter that I needed her to stay right here, far enough away that she couldn't see anything if there was anything to see. I told her to start looking at rocks, which she happily did. I turned my attention back to my best friend on the line and whispered, "What do I do?" I walked slowly and quietly towards the brush. Like, should I shout and say something before I go over there? There was so much trash sprawled out in his area. Old food wrappers, cups, etc. I don't want to startle him and then he gets mad or something. We agreed I should say something before I moved too close. And then, just as children always do, my daughter decided that right before I was about to shout, it was a good time to show me this rock she had just picked up. My anxiety jumped through the roof because in no way did I want her near me while I was checking up on him. I panicked, I turned to her and sternly told her to stay where I told her to stay and walked her back there. There was no way I was going to tell her what I was thinking. Back closer to the wall I went and worked up the courage to shout, "Hey, are you okay?" I waited a long moment with heart racing. "There's no reply," I told my friend. The shadows from the brush made it dark where I assumed he'd be lying down. I had to get closer to be able to see him. "Okay, I'm walking closer now." I scanned the area looking for a tanned white guy lying down, but saw nothing that resembled a human. I narrated to my best friend what I was seeing. "I see his boots, but not him. I saw something very, very tan. But what?" I gasped in horrific realization, my mind finally put two and two together. I was looking at him. Those two thin, leathery things sticking out of his boots. The things I was staring at in confusion were his legs. He was lying on his back with his knees bent up in the air, feet flat on the ground. His mummified legs were all I saw before I turned around and speed walked back to my daughter. "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," I rambled on to my friend, trying to get the words out. I did my absolute best to try and stay calm, if only for my daughter's sake. He's mummified. Isa, you shouldn't have. My best friend felt concerned for my mental well-being, most likely. I had already been through so much in my life. I didn't explain anything to my kid, but grabbed her hand and made her speed walk back to our home. I knew I had to drop her off with my grandmother and then head back and call emergency services. I told my best friend my plan. I honestly cannot remember the conversation, but I'm certain I sounded on the verge of mortified panic. I didn't want to mention any details in front of my daughter and kept things indescriptive. A mutual friend of ours was on the way to my place due to prior planning, so I had asked my friend to hang up, call them, and tell them what was going on. The walk back to my home was both very long and very short. My heart was pounding, and my mind was in shock at what I saw. I was looking for a living being, someone much taller than me, someone with scraggly hair and dirty clothes. Not someone that looked like an ice mummy. How long was he dead for? How long were we and all the dozens of other people smelling his decay? When was the last time I saw him? Was that actually him? Did I actually see that? Maybe I made that up. No, it is real. Oh my God, this is real. I was right. My mind raced with thought after thought, feeling vehemently overwhelmed. My grandmother greeted us at the open door to our home. I got the shoes off my kid and told her to go wash up. Once she was out of earshot, I turned to my grandmother, who stood at a foot in front of me. My eyes felt huge, my heart went calm, and I couldn't get the words out. How do I say this out loud? What is it? My grandmother looked at me with seriousness in her eyes. Finally, I choked the words out in strained gasps. The homeless man. I found him. He's dead. He's a mummy. He's mummified. I have to head back there. I have to call the cops. My grandmother wasn't overly fond of my idea to go back. She tried saying that someone must already know that he's dead. That did not work on me in the slightest. Then she tried saying that I should call the non-emergency line instead of the emergency one, and that I should wait in front of our complex for the police and not down by the body. Neither of those things amounted to any argument in my do the right thing mind, and his body was technically a biohazard, so the emergency line it was. I filled up my water bottle and was back out the door in under 2 minutes. I called up another best friend because I had shared my fears with him as well, but he didn't answer. So I had to do my best to calm myself down. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed 911. Within 15 seconds, I had an operator on the line asking me if I needed police, fire, or medical assistance. Police? I said, and maybe medical? Whoever the coroner is with? I found a dead body. A few minutes more on the phone, and I had paramedics and police on their way to me. I hurried in a straight panic to the entrance of the shopping complex. I walked through the dirt and hesitated when I got closer to the bush. Should I go over again and double check what I saw? I didn't know if that was the right thing to do or not. I chose to not look again and be respectful. You probably wouldn't want to be looked at in that state by anyone more than necessary, I thought. The wind picked up, and I was standing downwind at the edge of the lot in a small bit of sidewalk. The smell was even worse to me now that I knew what it was. I wanted to vomit, but swallowed it down. Just a few days earlier, I read on a Reddit post where someone mentioned that the smell of a dead body is one you'll never forget once you encounter it. I can confirm that person was very correct. Worse than soured milk. Worse than feces. Worse than garbage juice in the bottom of the can. It was a stench of decay, of moist meat sitting in a closed container on a warm countertop for a week and then opened. Worse. This was the scent of rotting human flesh being steadily roasted in low heat for weeks. It was not an easy smell to imagine. I looked at my Anpu, Anubis, tattoo on my wrist. Ever since I got the tattoo, I've taken notice of death gathering around me. A wild rabbit I found injured and tried to care for, but it passed away before I found anyone local. I buried it in that dirt lot. My cat died in a horrible manner that I still cannot speak of. Next, I found a cat who passed away. His body was left in that dirt lot on a blanket with a toy nearby. I couldn't allow it to just lay there, so I buried it in that dirt lot as well. And now, today, have I placed upon myself the role of caretaker of the dead? Do not hope not. But if that is the way it's going to be, then may I do it with as much respect and care as possible. But this is not what I asked for, I shouted to the sky. I don't know if Anpu heard me or not. As I stood there waiting to flag down the paramedics, I cried. Tears fell down my face. I started to feel the reality of who I had just found. What if I had said something to him that he was dying? What if I bought him food, or even just water whenever I saw him? What if I had checked the first day I smelled something? What if... No, this was sad. It's so horribly sad. But he was an adult who made their own choices. I had to remind myself that I couldn't and cannot help others when I can't even help myself. The wind whipped around me. I tried to not look too tragic, standing by a stop sign crying. There were cars pulling out of the lot, and I didn't want to bring attention to what was going on, but I couldn't stop crying. I heard sirens in the distance to my right. The paramedic was coming, loud and bright, its lights flashing, horn honking before it entered the intersection. I waved my arm high in the air so they knew where to go. The vehicle pulled over to the side of the curb, and one of two men got out to approach me. He was Asian, older than me, and spoke kindly. I guided him to where the man lay dead. He held out his hand to stop me from having to see it again, and approached closer than I previously did. A few moments later, he walked back and saw his partner approaching with a medical bag. "We're not going to need that," he said to his partner. He tried to convey to his partner that the man had been dead for some time without being detailed. I told them all that I knew, that he was a homeless man who lived in the area, that I started to smell something about a week ago, or longer, I later came to realize, and the last time I saw him was 2 to 2.5 weeks ago. I told them about the yellowing of his eyes. I sat in the back of the paramedic's vehicle as we waited for the police to arrive. I spoke with the other paramedic, an elder white man with glasses. I think he was trying to calm me or slightly distract me from the ugly reality that was happening. When the police arrived, I spoke with 2 male officers. I repeated the same information I knew, that he was homeless, didn't make much friends with the other homeless in the area, stayed in this little area, should have an ID on him because he bought alcohol, but I didn't know any personal details. I told them the 2 places they could ask about him, the liquor store and the pharmacy/store he always hung out by. They asked if I was able to stay and speak to the coroner, who should be the next to arrive. I said I would, and that I had nothing more important to do than to see this through. This man seemed to have no one that cared about his whereabouts. The least I could do is make sure he was laid to rest properly. The paramedics left, and now I waited in the back of a police car. While waiting, I filled out a statement, something I assumed not everyone was willing to do from how one of the officers asked. Time passed by slowly as I sat in the back of the vehicle. Fortunately, the seating was more comfortable than I expected. Sometimes the officers stepped out of the car or looked something up on the laptop in front and other things. One of the officers asked me if a man on their laptop looked like the deceased. Oh, good, I thought, an ID attempt is already underway. In the photo, the man had the right face shape, the hairline, skin tone, and unshaven face, but his smile was unusually huge and toothy, and eyes squinted extremely small. Clearly, He was under the influence of something during the time of that mugshot. How decayed must his face be to not be able to ID him? How long was he out there? Was he already dead when my daughter and I were here on the 8th? Did he drink himself to death? What was his name? In over 3 years, has no one missed him? In the back of the cop car, I silently cried off and on while I let my thoughts wander. The initial shock was fading, and my body began to tremble. The cop car was very cold, but I wasn't. Not yet, at least. My body just needed a way to release my anxiety, adrenaline, or both. My friend that was previously on the way to my place drove past, but I never noticed. They helped out at my home and waited while I waited. My grandmother most likely looked at this man's death like she looked at her father. She texted me to come back home multiple times, to not wait and speak to the next official, that I wasn't responsible for that person. But if it wasn't me, then who? Who would have checked on him? How much longer would we have been left in the desert to be fodder for fowl and insects? People were always walking the same path that I walked to the corner and back, but clearly no one called us in. As a pagan and as a decent human being, I had to make sure his body was picked up and taken care of. He never did anything that I saw or knew of that permitted him to be seen as less than human. The coroner took a long time to arrive. I guess a 911 operator can't submit for them to come out, or maybe she was busy, I don't know. The coroner was a beautiful Asian and/or Pacific Islander woman who doubled up on her gloves and went to take photos with the large camera that hung around her neck. After she was done with her photos, a white van pulled up with 2 young people and space in the back for 4 gurneys. 4 bodies. At this time, I now stood outside and the cop car was moved into a better spot to allow traffic to pass. The wind danced and flew all around us, never fully stopping. It picked up the scent of decay and swirled it around me, into my hair and through my clothes. I wanted to plug my nose, but noticed that none of the 5 people here now wore masks over their faces. How much death have they seen to no longer be bothered by putrefaction? How much worse could this scene be if we were not in a dry desert? I still was and am having a hard time wrapping my mind around how a living, breathing man was now a thin, brown skin pulled taut over bone in only 2 weeks. One of the officers approached me and told me that his body was going to be brought out, so if it might bother me, I informed him that I unironically wrote horror and would be okay. Fortunately, they did place his body in a body bag before he came out into my view, but I will never, ever forget what I saw. It's one thing to research images on a computer screen, but when it's a scene before your very eyes and your senses are filled with it, it's not the same. It brought every true crime story where the killer dumped the body to life. The details of crime scenes, they would be too real to me now. The coroner was the last person for me to speak to. I repeated myself for a 3rd time, but not any less eager to help than the first. She gave me her card, and I was dropped off at home by the officers. The moment I walked through my door, I started sobbing. I dropped to my knees and held my daughter tight. My calm demeanor was gone. I didn't have to stay strong anymore, but I was still living it. The smell was on my clothes and my hair. I smelled of pus, vomit, and spoiled meat. I smelled of death and refused to leave my nostrils. My grandmother took one whiff and said she could smell it on me. I went straight to my bedroom and tore my clothes off while shaking. I wanted to be rid of that scent. I jumped into a hot shower and scrubbed myself until all I could smell was my honey conditioner. When I exited my bathroom and bedroom in clean clothes, I felt better. But then I smelt it. The decay. I smelt it everywhere. I grabbed the shoes I was wearing and threw them onto my patio along with my water bottle. Everything needed to be cleansed and aired out. My clothes went straight into the washing machine with some salt in case anything tried to attach itself to me. I shook some salt over my shoes for good measure as well. The rest of my day was filled with cannabis, Japanese sake, quiet contemplation, and crying alone at night on my patio. I poured an offering of sake and lit some incense in remembrance of John Doe. Ironic, I know, but it felt fitting. I am still fading between numbness and shock. Yesterday felt so surreal, so tragic. The smell still hasn't gone away. I smell him as random as I move about my home, and it startles me. I truly hope that this man will be ID'd and laid to rest peacefully. I hope his next life will be filled with better choices and blessings. I'll sprinkle some salt and herbs in his space in a few days. I feel that is how negative energy spaces or haunted places begin, and I wouldn't want that to happen. It'll also allow me to have a sense of closure. I'll tell him to move on and do better next time. I hope he listens. Thank you for listening to my story. I don't really have a whole lot to say after this. I did go back with my friend and I sprinkled some herbs and some salt in that area. Surprisingly, when I went back, this space was not cleaned up. And I went back a few days after everything happened. But his pillow and the space where his body was it had not been cleaned. It had not been sanitized. Nothing had been removed, which was very surprising and kind of disturbing. And that was not something I was going to do, though. So I don't know if that's going to be up to the owner of whoever owns that lot of land or what. I don't know what happened to the gentleman's body. I don't know if he officially got ID'd. I don't know any of these things. I wanted to know what the state did to unidentified bodies or unclaimed. I haven't looked that up. I did reach out on social media to someone that works in a funeral home, and I asked them a question and stuff. They gave me a little closure, but if anything, I hope the story inspires you to check on people that maybe don't get checked on very often. We hear about stories of someone passing away and then not being found out until later on, and I think that's really, really sad. Even if they're a messed up person, I think their body should be laid to rest. I don't think things should just be, I don't think people or animals or whatever should just be discarded. And I am pagan, so that it's very important to me that things do get laid to rest properly and certain respects are shown and everything. So again, if you have any experiences or anything, I would love to hear some comments down below, other stories. Anyways, have a safe and happy Halloween. I'm going to try to get my stories out every 2 weeks. I am still having a lot of issues with my hand. I got stuff that I'm doing for it, but it's not enough. My hand starts hurting real bad. I'm not able to type. And I'm trying to play video games again too, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. So I will guys see you next time. Please be safe. Check on people. And yeah, unfortunately, the voice in my head this time was definitely what it seems. When it comes to true horror stories, they're a lot more fucked up than you think, in my opinion. But it's been some time, and I'm doing a lot better mentally. But if I dwell on it too long, I don't think I should. So stay safe, y'all. See you in the next one.